All right, grade fives. Last week I gave you the Chef Solis book, which Mrs. Spencer has attached this week as well, if you want to look at it again. And I just want to work through some of the things we looked at last week. We looked at the different food groups, being veggies, fruits, grains, protein, dairy. We mentioned that grains, also known as carbohydrates, it's a much more fancy word to call it. Then you would have read through the food pyramid, and you would have read through the 5 groups there and why they are important. I asked you to write that in a table for me on your lined page, and I'll show you the answers in a minute so you can check that you were right. Then you had to try and organize the foods. Now, if we'd been in class, we would have done this on the iPad and you could have moved them around. Unfortunately, you're at home and I'm missing your faces so much. So I asked you to write it up in a table. I gave you the headings and the names of the food. And your answers should be something like this. Now, in a minute, you'll see the answers that you should have in your book in terms of the words, but I thought I'd show you the pictures as well. So in vegetables, we've got carrots, sweet potato, mealies, and spinach. Meat and beans, we've got the bean salad, we've got the chicken, the rump or steak, and the fish. In dairy, we've got the cheese, the milk, the ice cream, and the yogurt. In fruits, we've got strawberries, grapes, kiwi fruit, and dragon fruit. It's quite an unusual fruit, but it's yummy. And then in grains, we've got pretzels, spaghetti, pasta, and rolls. Then we have this page, which you didn't need to do anything, but it's quite interesting to know that sometimes foods don't belong in only one group. So if you have a look at lasagna, you'll notice that I've said there are some grains because we use pasta lasagna sheets when we make lasagna. We use milk and we use flour to make the white sauce. Milk is obviously in dairy, but the flour actually belongs to grains. We use vegetables sometimes, so it depends on how mom makes her lasagna. If she makes lasagna with mince and she puts in carrots and peas and mealies and things like that into her mince, then yes, there's vegetables. If she only makes mince and she doesn't add anything else to the mince, then it's only the meat and beans or the protein group. So sometimes one food can actually belong to many different food groups. You don't have to do anything here. This is just for some information. Then you had to read through Eat the Rainbow, and it was important to know that each different kind of fruits and vegetables gives a different reason why it's good for your body. Okay, sometimes people say, oh, carrots make you see in the dark. They don't, but carrots are very good for your eye health. So I think that's where that rumor comes from. You had to copy something like this into your book. So what you had to do for me last week is on the lined page, you had to give me the little table and tell me why grains, vegetables, fruit, milk and dairy, meat and beans are important. You can pause the video now and check that you've done the correct thing in your book. Otherwise, I will put the memos in. You'll see that there'll be a link in Mrs. Spencer's letter, so you can go straight to that document and see that you've got them all right. You had to copy down the rainbow foods underneath that table, also on the lined page. And then on the blank page, you had to classify the different foods into their groups. Okay, and I showed you the pictures a minute ago, and here are the answers in the word format. Again, all these answers will be in the letter from Mrs. Spencer as well. But you can pause the video and check if you want to now. Remember, your book might have the blank page first and the lined page second. That's also okay. Right, then we're moving on to this week's work, which we're looking at. Chef Solis has given us 10 tips to healthy eating, ways to stay healthy. And his first tip is super important, and he says we need to stay active. Okay, and this is really difficult during the lockdown because we don't really move around that much. We're inside and we kind of feel a little bit more lazy than we normally do. So it's important even now to make sure that we stay active. You should aim for at least 15 to 20 minutes of activity every day. And if you're lucky enough to have a garden, I've got a garden. I try and run for about 3 kilometers every day, which is really difficult because I literally run from one wall to the next, turn around, run back. So it's quite demanding and quite tricky. But if you don't have a garden, you can even do things on the spot. So you can run on the spot, you can do some star jumps, you can do some push-ups, you can do mountain climbers, if you know what those are. All those kinds of activities you can do without needing very much space, just to get your heart beating for 15 to 20 minutes every day. His second tip, number 2, says you need to pay attention when your stomach says you're full. Very often we sit and we eat food and we maybe watch a program while we're eating our food and we don't actually focus on the eating. And so our brain doesn't really register that our tummies are full, and then we go and eat more. When we are distracted, we eat more. Think about if you go to the movies and you have a big bowl of popcorn. You eat the whole bowl of popcorn, maybe even before the movie starts, and you don't even realize you've finished it. His tip number 3 says try not to have large portion sizes. Dish up a little bit first and see when you finish that if you are still hungry. Very often we're so hungry that there's a saying that says our eyes eat more than our mouths, okay? Because you are so hungry that you dish up this huge plate full of food, but actually you're not that hungry when you start eating. Tip number 4 says you should try and eat foods from all the food groups every day. Okay, so don't just focus on one food group, a little bit of everything each day. Tip number 5, if you dish up a plate of food, you should actually dish up at least half that plate should be made up of fruits and vegetables. So some salad, some roast veg, things like that. Okay, very often, especially in South Africa, we have a lot of protein and a lot of starch or carbohydrates or grains. So we'll have a stew and we have rice and we have potatoes and we have meat, but very little vegetables. Then his tip number 6 says drink non-fat or skim milk, okay, or 1% or low-fat milk. Try and keep your heart happy with low-fat dairy foods. Dairy's got quite a lot of fat in it, so we should try and choose the low-fat options if we can. This also applies to yogurt. Number 7, make sure there are whole grains on your plate. So things like whole wheat bread rather than white bread, brown rice rather than white rice, sweet potato rather than potato. These are all better choices if you can. Then we have a look at number 8. Now it's okay to have sweets and chips and things like that, but we shouldn't really eat too much of them. So have them as a treat, but you shouldn't really be having junk food every single day. Number 9, try and choose foods with less salt. Salt can be really bad for your heart, and so we need to try and not add too much salt to our food or choose foods that are very high in salt. So we need to avoid those foods where we can. And his last little tip says drink water instead of drinks full of sugar. Even fruit juices actually have got a lot of sugar in them compared to if you were to eat the actual fruit. So we need to try and make sure that we drink lots of water rather than fruit juice and energy drinks and soda drinks and things like that. You should be aiming for 1.5 liters to 2 liters of water every day to keep your body in tip-top condition. So think to yourself, how much water have you had today? Right, what I need you to do in your books, you don't have to think of this by yourself. I've given you the answers already, so you just have to copy it in your books. If you look on the screen, I've done it over 2 pages, but that's only so that it's nice and big for you to see. So you can pause this video. I don't want you to do it over 2 pages. I would like you to only do it over 1 page, whichever page comes next, blank or lined. And your heading is 10 tips to a healthy plate. And you can divide the rest of your page the way I have. So you've got 3 rows of 3 blocks. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then at the bottom, the whole section at the bottom can be block number 10. So you'll need 4 rows and you'll have to divide that into 3 columns, but the last row is all in one. And there are his 10 tips. I've summarized it for you so there isn't too much writing. And that's basically 10 ways that you can make sure that you have a healthy plate and that you stay healthy. Remember, you're only doing it on 1 page, so like that. But you can use the whole page for your table. Okay, I've just made it nice and big so that you don't have to use a magnifying glass to see the things there. Okay, so you can pause that and copy that into your book. The next few pages on the Chef Solis book, you don't have to worry about. We'll look at those again when we're back at school. It's not that important. It's just interesting. And that's it. Always make healthy choices for a healthy body. I hope you have a good week. I hope to see you soon at school. I can't wait. Cheers, grade 5s.